So I've got the engine out and looking at this frame horn, and we can see that the nut, I'll call it the nut, that was welded into the frame horn, it didn't really rust out. It probably got seized and they twisted it out. We can kind of see how this piece of sheet metal is folded over. Probably it got twisted like that. So I'm going to try to, just as a first attempt, just using a hammer, tap the sheet metal back to where it used to be and see how that looks. Well, that actually isn't too bad for 30 seconds of hammering. Let's see if we can get this piece of metal here folded back up to where it belongs. We'll do that on the vise.
Oh, mosquitoes. Well, that just broke right off.
Okay. Well, so much for that. Well, I think we can weld that back in there. Maybe a little bit more hammering first. See some, still a little bent out up here. Why don't we pull that motor mount out of there? Well, to really work on that, I would have to pull the transmission, but I don't want to do it. I'm trying not to do that. Maybe a pair of vice grips. These are puny little vice grips, but I don't know, they might work. I have a bigger pair somewhere. Yeah. Well, that actually worked. It's really starting to take shape, actually. There's some, it looks like a fracture in the metal here that runs back. I'm going to tap it more with the hammer. There's undercoating on this too, so sometimes it's hard to see what's metal and what's undercoating. I probably should get in here with the wire wheel and really clean it up good. Let's see. That's where it belongs, right there. So, I think I can probably get my welder in around here and bead that in. The other thought I had was to find a piece of tubing that fit over this diameter, so maybe 1.125" inside diameter tubing and whatever this outside is. And if I could attach that and then I could slide it in here, then I could rosette weld it in a couple of spots. That might be a more substantial repair. It'd definitely be a more substantial repair. it would probably be okay. I think that's what I have to do. So the most precision of tools, the plastic caliper. And we'll measure it in a couple places. So in that location, I get 1.5 inches, exactly 1.5 inches. How about that? Yeah, 1.5 inches. So 1.5 OD, and let's see. What is that? 1 1/8 inches. Yeah, so 1.5 inches outside diameter, 1 1/8 inches inside diameter. I'm pretty sure I can find that. Yeah, so I'm going to make I'll get a length of tubing, and I'm going to weld it onto the original nut. I'll stick it back maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 inches, and then that I will slide into this frame horn. I can drill a couple holes in the outside diameter of the frame horn, and I'm going to weld through those holes into that tubing, so like a rosette weld. That'll be very sturdy. It'll be, I think, good enough to hold up this engine and this transmission. Yeah, so let's get that tubing and let's see if it works. So we're back to working on the frame horn today. I've started by working on the nut that will ultimately get fit into this piece of steel tubing that I bought, 0.124 inches in inside diameter. This is a little over. I trimmed back the sheet metal, and I'm tacking it with a bench grinder, and I'll grind it until it fits into this hole, and then I'll use a die grinder and I'll put a chamfer on the inside so that I can get this nut snugged right up to the end of the pipe. Then we'll fit the pipe for length, cut it off, and weld it into the car. Okay, after a good bit of grinding, this fits in here nicely, and it leaves me a nice little space for a weld fillet. See if I can get that in the frame. There we go. So we can fill in that little triangular space with weld. That'll give us a good fillet. So I've got the steel tube tapped into the end of the frame horn, and I've done this just so I can mark the tubing with a file, and I can pull the steel out, and it'll give me an idea of how much penetration I'm getting into the frame horn, and then I can transfer that length back to this end is where I prepared for the weld, and I can go down to the bandsaw and cut it off. I'm also going to drill some holes through the side of the tubing so that I can rosette weld into that nut. That'll give it a good, strong connection. Well, I forgot to take the phone down to where the bandsaw was, so sorry if you were expecting a nice bandsaw montage. Not happening today. But there we have it, ready for welding. I've tapped that in so I can't take it out. I did add a little bit of a chamfer around the top edge just to give me a little bit more room for the weld bead, and I've put in these 4 holes that I will weld through just to give it a little bit extra security. So I'm going to get the welder going. I'm going to fully weld this on the bench. So there's the first pass. I'm using a rosin core welder, not a MIG, so it's a lot of splatter. Looks kind of ugly, but the rosette welds came out pretty good actually. I'm going to grind it all down to see if there's any big pits and inclusions, and maybe back weld a little bit, and then we'll fit it to the car. Hopefully it's cool by now. While I'm waiting for the insert to cool, I got the wire wheel out, cleaned up the end of the frame horn a little bit more, and I drilled some holes that I know I can get to with the welder, and I'll rosette weld through those holes into the insert after it's in place. The flange is opened up here too. I'm going to leave that like it is for now, and then once the insert's in, I'll clamp the vice grips on there, pinch it shut, and then I'll either weld it from the edge, or I might do a rosette weld there also by drilling through one side of the flange from the bottom. So I've got my welds ground back, and I started to tap the the insert into the right frame horn, and everything looks really good. I've taken a measurement from the underside of the body down to the top of the flange. On the left side, it measures 15¼ inches, and I get the same measurement on the right, so I'm confident that I have the correct height. I've also taken a measurement from the front box section of the frame here back to the face of the nut on the left side, and I'm just going to duplicate that measurement on the right side, just tapping that insert in until I get the same measurement. Once it's in place, we can break out the welder again and tack it in. And now with the insert tapped into place, let me move my light. There it is. You can see that it, can we see? We can't really see that it lines up with the other side, but trust me, it does. It's at the right height, it's at the right position fore to aft. We can see that the flange opened up a little bit, but that's no problem because we're going to pinch it shut and weld it. I'm going to hit those 2 rosette welds, hopefully not catch that block of wood on fire. Tack in around the perimeter, and we'll do a check fit with the transmission bracket. Okay, transmission cross mount is in. I've got the the transmission mounts nutted in, and all the holes are lining up, and the transmission is nice and square in the back of the vehicle. See down below, everything looks really good. Nice, we can kind of frame the front of the car with that transmission mount. It's looking perfectly level. So now I'm going to take it all apart, finish the welding, and we'll call this job done. So I'm back on the left side, and I noticed a crack in where the weld, where the insert is welded into the frame horn. This is from the factory. There's a crack that runs right along here and underneath, and it comes up through the flange. It looks like the spot welds on the frame horn got opened up, probably by somebody putting too much torque on that nut trying to get it out. So I'm just going to over weld it and stitch that flange up a little tighter. Okay, so we've got the frame horn repair completed. A little bit of grinding, actually a lot of grinding. It was like an episode of the A-Team in here. Some more welding, some more grinding, some wire wheeling, and a little bit of paint, just primer. There, that maybe looks a little better. And then I sprayed my fluid film inside both frame horns, so you can see it's dribbling out a little bit on that side. And so concludes Project Frame Horn. I'll spray some black paint up there, maybe not. It'll just get covered in dirt and grease and oil, and it'll blend right into the scenery. Motor mount or transmission mount is in, motor mounts are in. I've got the little Volkswagen Thing skid guard in there. That'll have to come out when I put the engine in, but that's a good way for me to not lose it or the fasteners. And there we have the other side. And once again, this is really fun. If I got that beam up underneath the front of the car, and I got the skid plate in the back, and to my eye, it looks level. Make the noise. Good job. Okay, pick up tools. See you in the next episode.